Hi, my name is Francois Nodia, and this is Super Teachers Unite, the show dedicated to finding out what it takes to teach like a superhero. Now, all of us had that favorite teacher when we were at school, and they were very influential early in our lives, and we remember them fondly. Now, in every episode, I'll interview business leaders and other super teachers so that they can share the stories about the super teachers in their lives that were so influential on the successes that they made of their lives. Now, they'll share stories from the classroom, but as well as the boardroom. In every episode, our guest stories will assist us in finding out, especially if you're a super teacher, what it is going to take to improve your practice. And if you're a business leader, how will you improve your people, your processes, and your profits? Now, if you need me to assist you in finding out how you can teach like a superhero, check out our website at staysuper.co.za. You can go and work in any industry of your choosing. This is the message that Kim Craig shared with us during today's episode. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not encouraging teachers to leave the profession. I mean, I've said that in the most popular video that's on my YouTube channel that's titled, "What else can you do with your teaching degree?" which has now got more than 30,000 views. I mean, I don't want teachers to leave the profession, but I know that there are many of you that are looking for other opportunities. Maybe you want to broaden your horizons. So one thing that Kim said in this episode, and it really resonates with me, is the fact that teachers have got so many transferable skills. We've got so many things that we can do that we can take into other industries, but in many instances, we aren't confident in our skills, and maybe we feel like we won't cope in another industry because people tend to look down on teachers, and this isn't the case whatsoever. Kim shares with us that she's employed a teacher in her law firm or the business design firm that works within law, and the teacher that she employed absolutely blew her away in the capabilities that they have. So Kim is the founder of Bulldog Studios. Now, in the legal sphere, having a company with a name like that is quite bold. So it was amazing to have this chat with Kim about what are the similarities between the legal industry and education. The fact that both these industries can be quite conventional or traditional in their approaches, and changing mindsets within these industries are extremely difficult. So in this episode, Kim shares amazing knowledge on specifically things like teachers working in other industries, but more specifically what principals can do to adapt to change, and then why curiosity is so important in the workplace. I hope you enjoy this one. So Kim, everybody now knows a little bit more about you because of the introduction we've done, but I know my teachers and I know we are very inquisitive and we want to go and stalk everybody that we meet. So where would be the best place for teachers to learn more about you?
The best place, I'm active on LinkedIn, Kim R. Craig, and also on Twitter, Kim_Craig, and also just really to get an essence of who I am and the company I'm in now, you could look at bulldogstudio.com at our website, and it gives you a flavor of our kind of tone and style and such. So
yeah,
hit me up at any of those places.
I'm very excited to speak about Bulldog Studios because the name itself is very, very interesting. But we'll be sure to share from our side. Just make sure that we share your links in the post that we make so that our audience can also find you there. Now, Kim, as with all of our other guests, I am truly obsessed with finding out what it means to be a super teacher. And I ask all of my guests the same question. Tell us about a teacher that made a massive impact on your life.
So that is such a great question. Ever since I met you through our shared presentation group, you've made me think about, who's had an impact from an educator's standpoint. And so as I shared, like this trip through memory lane, thinking about that. And I had a lot of great teachers, all the way back to my first grade teacher who I loved dearly. But there was one teacher that really always has stood out to me, and it was my sixth grade teacher, Mr. Hayes. And in some ways, he's not like, there's no single thing that was so remarkable about him, but when I look back at that year, I remember it as very fun and engaging. yes, I'm still in contact with some of the kids that I was in school with in sixth grade, but it all came back to Mr. Hayes and how engaging he was and fun he made it, and just really thought a little bit outside the box.
Now, what is remarkable for me and what comes to mind here is probably his consistency. Because if there's no one thing that really jumps out, like, oh, that was the lesson that broke through for me, it's more likely that his consistency in the approach in which he taught, in, as you say, being innovative, making it fun for you guys, that must have meant that he was quite consistent in the way in which he approached his teaching.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then, when I really thought about this even more, I think he was the first professional that kind of introduced me to breaking status quo. He was untraditional in some ways. And one specific thing that has always, here we are 41 years later, at least 41, maybe more, 47 years later, I think. Now this was like 1972 or 3. So put yourself back in that time if you were alive. And he took a trip to Russia at that time, which was, that was unconventional to do at the time, from the United States, took a trip to Russia, and he came back so enamored with the culture and everything he had learned, and he brought that back into the classroom. And as sixth graders, we had some idea of the rest of the world, but not to that level of intimacy. And so much so, his excitement for what he learned about Russia and being there and such, he got the high school Russian teacher to come teach us Russian. Once a week, that teacher came and taught us Russian. And it was unconventional because as we would have got into 7th or 8th grade, the school did teach French and Spanish, but no Russian. That was not the thing. And so he got the high school teacher to come teach us. And to this day, I can still count to 10 and say a few things in Russian, and somewhat as a tribute to that effort that he brought. And his excitement was contagious. And it was just such a unconventional thing, like I said, and it really made an impression on me. And I've even taught my kids how to count to 10 in Russian. Not like a big feat, but it was just like, it just had such an indelible mark on me that, and it was that kind of thing that he engaged us in. And like I said, kind of was the first to introduce me to kind of breaking tradition and status quo, and something that I didn't realize at that time would probably put me on a path towards some of that in my own career.
Yeah, I mean, that's truly unconventional, especially for the time period, given the political climate, to really be open enough to introduce a US classroom to cultures and the ways of Russian people, given the of course the volatility at the time. And right. some would still say there's a lot of that still happening today. So just in that way, in the sense that his curiosity and his enthusiasm brought into the classroom this notion that you can break down barriers. You don't necessarily have to believe the propaganda or the media, but that you can try and find out for yourself. And as you said, like breaking that status quo, because I don't think there would have been many teachers with enough guts to do something like that.
No, not at all. Not at all. And, I was too young to understand maybe some of the political strife in the school that he maybe even faced in doing that. But I was forever grateful for it. And like I said, it just kind of opened an aperture of a new way of looking at things. And like you said, breaking down barriers and not making assumptions and biases based on the propaganda, as you say.
So if this is now one instance of a teacher that made an impact in your life, but if we were to look at the other teachers that you went through, that you were taught, would you say there's a specific characteristic, one or two real important traits of those individuals that you would deem is absolutely necessary for a teacher to be called a super teacher?
Well, that takes me to something that I had shared with you that I didn't, again, realize until much later, is how important and how amazing a lot of the educators I had, their facilitation skills, their ability to stand up in front of a room, whether it's working with first graders or, at a university level, and be able to, we say the word facilitate, and that can have many kind of manifestations, but really to be able to be flexible and agile to pull in students of all different varying levels and such. It's an amazing capability that when I look back through my history, of educators, I know there's some that were better than others, and those that were better at it were, it goes back to Mr. Hayes, being able to really get that level of engagement, motivation, create momentum and such. And I think I don't often hear teachers described in that way. Maybe in your world they are, but it's not something that I often hear described. And as I've had an ability or opportunity to hire people, I shared with you a story where one of the members of the team I had hired, who had only been in the workforce a couple of years, but he had actually been a teacher. And we hired him with little, like you said, fairly green. I'll say fairly green. And he blew my mind. His ability to stand in front of the boardroom and facilitate in front of the most seasoned experts, I was astounded. And I didn't realize, oh my gosh, he's pulling on that all of that experience he had, even in those couple of years of teaching at a grade school level. He was able to bring that into the boardroom, and those facilitation skills accelerated him beyond some of the more seasoned people on my team.
And that's when you told me that story, I just thought I had to share it with the world. So I'm glad you've shared it now, but also included it in my newsletter at the time. That we've got this view as teachers, like, we're just teachers, like, oh shame, woe is me, I am this poor little teacher in a small classroom and I don't really make a lot of an impact, I'm just here. When the truth of the matter is, teachers have got so many transferable skills that would make them successful in any industry that they step into. And this was an example of that, where a person, as you say, a very green, inexperienced individual, coming from teaching as a profession, walking into the world of law, that's the field that you find yourself in, and being able to present in front of a board of clients, being able to speak up in a court of law, those kind of skills, we really often take it for granted. What great public speakers teachers can be.
Yes, absolutely. And in my profession, in the legal industry, we work with very seasoned, successful, sometimes big egos, lawyers. And one of the traits that I'm always looking for in building teams and capabilities is hiring people that can walk into a room and have command and presence and confidence. And so when I had this gentleman on my team at like 26 years old, and just in a few short months, I had him accompany me to talk with a lot of our more senior partners and solving problems and such. And then we had an opportunity to go in front of one of the most seasoned groups, mature practice areas in the firm, in the boardroom. And I'm like, come on, Carl, you're going to do this with me. And it was amazing to see him just so comfortable to stand up and lead the discussion, engage these, some of these lawyers in their 60s and 70s, like I said, who are very, very successful. And I became, I had a reputation with that group, but here I brought in this young lad, and I took a seat. I sat down, and I actually became his mouse clicker. He's like, next slide. And he had the floor. It was awesome. I wish I could have recorded it that day, because when we came back downstairs to the group and I shared with them, I'm like, it was unbelievable. This is part of what you guys need to emulate, is having that confidence and such. And we're like, how do we create that experience for people on my team who many were very seasoned and such, but weren't quite as comfortable in facilitating in front of a group like that. So, I started looking for teachers. Like, I need to hire more teachers.
Well, that's good news for the teachers out there who want to like broaden their horizons and move into other fields. Like, you may have the confidence to move into another industry. You don't have to only remain a teacher for your entire life. I mean, people have got portfolios of careers. You don't only need to be a high school teacher or a classroom teacher. You can add so many other things to your portfolio of career possibilities, and I think that's for many teachers a next step. And I just think some of us lack the confidence of moving into those industries. But here we've got a case study of where it is absolutely possible for somebody to move from teaching into another space, taking their transferable skills with them that people are really striving to have. Now, Kim, I'm obsessed, as I said, with finding out what the traits of a super teacher is, because what I eventually want to do is take teachers and give them the opportunities to work for the schools that they really want to. And in that vein, we've started a recruitment company called goteach.co.za. Now, I ask all my guests this because I want to find out, what are employers looking for? What are you looking for in the traits of the people that you want to employ, that want to work for you? What are you looking for?
So I thought one of the best ways to answer that is we have a post right now for a position, and I wanted to just read to you a part of like what we look for, and it really has to do with curiosity. I mean, I talk about this all the time, which is there's technical skills. So the team that I had that I'm talking about, that my friend Carl was on, were project managers, legal project managers that worked with the lawyers and clients to plan how to do the work and then execute the work. And we would look for certification in project management and such. But what that was easy to find in some ways. What was harder to find were the people with the soft skills, like I said, be able to command, to facilitate, to lead, engage. And we drive change within our industry. We're trying to shift the way that lawyers think and other professionals. And so part of what we always look for is we love passionately curious people who think of themselves as lifelong learners and are curious about many things. You are humble, engaging, intelligent, and our next best friend. You have strong opinions with open mind. You are proactive and entrepreneurial, and you know how to take boldly and give graciously. Critical thinking is your sharpest tool, and you're able to think through the toughest problems. So that's right from one of our posts, and as you can see, we're not talking about a lot of technical capabilities, which is important too, but it's this insatiable curiosity is one of the things that has been most important to us, which leads to critical thinking. Mm-hmm. And as we in the field I'm in, solving problems, helping to drive change, we have a saying, don't fall in love with the problem, don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem. And that requires curiosity and not just moving fast and acting as a conveyor belt to move things along. You have to actually lean in and really appreciate that problem and explore it and investigate it. So that's also to the type of people we look for.
Now that's very interesting, because throughout the season so far, we're seeing themes develop through the guests when we ask them this question. And exactly this thing that you just mentioned, in that the hard skill, the qualification is important. But I mean, once you start screening just for qualification, you still end up with hundreds of possible candidates for a position. And it is these soft skills that start setting people apart. And you are not the first guest to say that curiosity is an important element. So I'm loving the fact that this theme is coming through. And for the teachers out there, if you want to set yourself apart, if you want to show that you are you have a leg up on your competition, is showcasing the fact that you are curious. Now, Kim, I am curious to find out how you actually find or test or screen for curiosity in your interview processes. That if this is part of the requirement of the job posting you have, how can you really ensure that the candidates that apply for a position with you, how do you know that they're curious?
Well, that is such a tough question. That is a great question. And it has to do, like when we talk to them, it's really getting them to kind of unpack their approaches to share with us like what they are passionate about. And we probably run a bit of a non-traditional kind of interview process. It's just my partner and I in our startup. And one thing I'll tell you, I'll give a hint to anybody that would be applying for us. Do they ask us questions? And it's amazing, Francois, how many people don't. And, we'll go through and give some background and like from their side and our side. And many times, like, do you have any questions for us? And you're like, no, I don't think so. And we're like, okay, next.
Yes.
So they're not doing that thinking. They're not displaying that curiosity. And so that's something as simple as that is very telltale. It's very, very telltale.
I mean, if you're not curious about the job you're applying for and you can't showcase your curiosity for that, how is it even possible for you to land the job? So on the website, on Go Teachers website, we share blogs and tips and tricks for teachers who are applying for jobs on exactly this. How do you showcase? How do you prove that you've got these skills? And what you've just said is so valuable that because it always happens in an interview, they would ask you, right, do you have any questions for us? Now, as you said, the major problem is when people don't have questions to ask. And then the second one's you reveal a lot about your ambition in the questions that you ask. So if you ask if the immediate question is, how much will I get paid? We know what you're in for. If you ask, how's my leave? Or how many holidays do I get? Or is there like a hospital plan or medical aid? All of those kind of questions gives us insights into your ambition. So why not just use that time and say, well, I've seen from your website that, this or that. Or you say that I know that you've got clients on your board that are interested in the following. So and then you start unpacking, just showcasing that you've, number one, done your research, that this isn't just a company that one of the many I've applied to. So in that way, you can showcase your curiosity.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like you said, it's not only do they have questions, but the type of questions, and many times we'll front load the interview with that before we even get anything. Do you have questions for us? Like, what are you most curious about? What are you most excited about for the discussion we're going to have? And there are way too many that don't have a response to that.
Yep.
One thing I was thinking as you were talking, so like I said, I built a team of project managers, and in legal, it was unheard of to really have project managers working with lawyers. And so this goes back 20 years or so ago. And so it was early to put the discipline of project management in place. And so there wasn't a model out there. There wasn't a whole army of project managers in the legal industry to pull from. So we had to look for some of these soft traits and such. And as you were talking earlier, I'm thinking so many of the traits that I looked for, I never really thought about this, but teachers actually have a lot of the capabilities of project managers, and in so many ways I think you act as project managers. So project managers, being organized and task management and resource management and keeping an initiative moving forward and such. And it's how you drive change, it's how you influence and persuade. And so I could see a whole career path for teachers to go into the field of project management, which exists in every industry. There's project managers, there's over 1 million certified project managers in the world, and they're in every industry. It was new to the legal environment, but it's been a successful career everywhere. And I just think there's there's actually so much of the experience in your classroom that is applicable to that formal profession of project management, if people were interested to explore that.
Well, what I'm immediately thinking is that the teachers who are out there, one way of increasing or bolstering your skills in education as a teacher then is to do a project management course. Because if you're struggling with the admin, if you're struggling to balance everything in education, maybe there is something in project management that you can bring into your teaching that's just going to make your life and your processes easier. But for the teachers who want to move into another field, having project management certification will obviously assist you in landing a job in another industry then.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just a side note as you were talking. I'm like, I never really put those together, but yeah.
Now, this is what I refer to as idea sex. When we get two people together from different industries and we start sharing what's happening, now new and diverse ideas are forming, and this is the basis of innovation. You can have a look at so many different advances in technology that came about when 2 or 3 people from different industries started working together, and then you get innovation. So, Kim, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that there are so many teachers that's going to find value from this, and I hope there are other employers out there from different industries now considering, hey, maybe we should look for teachers. And not that I'm advocating for this though, because we need all of the teachers we can get, but it's actually low-hanging fruit. The salaries that teachers are getting paid, I mean, it's quite easy to get teachers to move if their consideration is also that of a financial one. So for the employers out there, definitely have a look at teachers for people to work in different fields within your company. But Kim, I'm extremely curious now to find out about your company name. So your company's name is Bulldog Studios. And the first time I heard that, and I know what your area of authority is, I'm like, how does that have anything to do with law and the legal? Please explain to us why Bulldog Studios.
So I have an amazing co-founder, Josh Kubicki, and as we brought together our experience and disciplines and decided to start our own company. He's the creative one, extremely creative. And so he calls me one day and he's like, I've come up with the name. He's like, it's Bulldog Studio. I'm like, what? It's like, because as you said, and especially in legal, it's a very traditional, conservative, we're talking big law, corporate law, we work with the largest global law firms in the world and such, and so very traditional. There is no other Bulldog Studio in legal. And what it stands for, though, BOLD is the business of law designed. Mm-hmm. And Josh and I bring our experience from business design, so design capabilities, as well as process improvement and such. And business of law designed, we believe that the competitive and strategic advantage of a legal team, a law firm, a corporate law department, really lies in the business of law, not the legal talent. Yes, you need great, smart lawyers, but legal expertise is table stakes. And it's very hard to compete on one lawyer being better than the other. It's hard for a client to judge, who's better than others. So when you look at an organization's operating model, their culture, like that whole ecosystem, that's where we believe differentiation resides. So business of law designed is BOLD. Duck speaks to our desire to work in an authentic, genuine way with our clients. And where it comes from is an architecture term. There are 2 types of buildings, and this is taught in the architecture school. It's a book that goes back, I think, initially coined like 1984, something like that. So 2 types of buildings. There are ducts and there are decorated sheds. Decorated sheds are buildings that would be any building as you're walking down the street. It could be, if you're looking at the building, like, is that a bank? Is that a store? Is it a law firm? Like, you don't know what it is except for the signage on the front of the building telling you what it is. So that's the decorated shed. A duck is a building by its form and substance. You know exactly what it is. Think of a stadium, a church, a marina. You know what happens inside those buildings. So when we work with our clients, we want them to think about their genuineness and authenticity. We're not going to try to make them something they're not. They are true to who they are, and so we work with ducks. We work with those people that we're trying to help them really be aware of the ingredients of their own culture and environment. And then, okay, where do you want to go from there? So Bulldog Studio is the name that we chose. And in some ways, quite honestly, Francois, there are some in our industry that can't even get those words out of their mouth. They're like, no, that's not us. But it's a way that it kind of vets the types of clients that we want to work with. If they can get comfortable with working with Bulldog Studio, and what we represent is typically we're working with conventional clients, and they have a conventional problem, but they need an unconventional approach. So it makes them somewhat of an unconventional client. They have an itch to scratch, they're not sure, the status quo hasn't worked. And so if they can get comfortable reaching out to a Bulldog Studio to engage and work with us, whether it's our reputation or just getting over the name, then we know that, okay, we've gotten the first hurdle over change management.
Yeah. So even by design, the name attracts a certain kind of client, which I think is very important to do. And as you were speaking, I realized schools are ducks. If you look at the buildings are form and function. So the way in which the schools are created is for a specific need. But now, of course, this is where the challenge comes, is that things change. The infrastructure we have in schools is still reminiscent of 19th century and 20th century kind of thinking and what was needed for the workplace. But now we know, especially after what happened in 2020, that there has been a change in the status quo. Now, I know you and your company is focused a lot on changing or helping people to adapt with change. Now, I'm very curious to find out the links there are between the legal or the law industry and that of education, because I do think there's a lot of similarities. And the reason why I say so, a lot of schools and teachers are very conservative, still traditional, very traditional in education, where that no longer really is what's going to help us survive. And I think the same is being said for law firms, in that the way in which they operate could easily be very traditional, very conventional. So how do you approach this change management or dealing with the change in status quo?
So a lot of it has to do with helping the teams that we work with. And again, very seasoned professionals, skeptics in many regards and such, because they've been successful. It's been a model that's worked for decades, and so the front end of the work we do is helping them to build individual and team self-awareness. Mm-hmm. Where they start to critique kind of the approaches and the ways that they've done things. First, themselves. It is also important to get to the client perspective and looking from the outside in. But first and foremost, it's really getting them to think about starting to question why they do things the way they do. That everybody's guilty in some regard to, well, we've always done it this way.
Yes.
And so we take a very inclusive approach, and we have people work divergently and convergently to explore and then condense their thinking down to, like I said, individually. We do facilitation where we help them work at an individual level, and then maybe team and pair, and then get to the group level. So you're constantly stress testing your assumptions and your biases, and you start to build this self-awareness and eagerness and curiosity that, oh yeah, there probably is a better way. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to create almost a tribe, but I found that it's got to start at the individual level. And everybody has a different starting point with that, right? Everybody's a little bit different as to their willingness to change. And so I think that self-reflection and self-awareness, and their different kind of tools and methods we use to do that, has proven to be extremely successful, even for the most skeptical, even the most kind of reserved. We'll go into some sessions and you see the people sitting there with their arms folded and they're not going to budge, right? And by the end, usually, you can see them starting to have more self-awareness and think about things a bit differently.
So let's say, for instance, I'm a principal, and prior to COVID-19 and lockdown, our school was like filled with kids every single day. Our teachers were teaching conventionally, and then emergency online teaching needed to happen, or remote teaching needed to happen. Now the classes are split. Just to give you an idea of what's happening in South Africa, we've got a rotation base, so we can't have all of our learners at the same time because our classrooms are not safe enough. We can't have, for instance, 40 to 50 kids in a classroom anymore. We have to split that up, like 20 to 25 learners in a class. Now that changes the process, because now on a Monday I'm seeing one half of the class, on a Tuesday I'm seeing the other half of the class. That already has got implications. Some of them are remaining at home because they need to self-isolate. I, as a teacher, now need to start getting the skill of managing all of these new requirements. Now, if I'm a principal and I were to have a conversation with you, Kim, saying that I don't know how to approach this. This is a lot of change happening at one time. What's the advice that you would give to a principal in that scenario?
So I think, I'm going to preface this with a little bit that the teachers, I have a lot of empathy for teachers now, because my partner and I also teach at the university. We teach law school students. And so this past year, I taught a course at the university, and some people were in person. I did a course, a semester-long course, but I also did a weekend certification with a group, and they were in person. It was 2 days, and it was the first time I actually had to wear the mask for 2 days and try to teach. 8 hours each day. And I don't think I fully appreciated how challenging that was going to be, and like not being able to, one, project your voice as much, as well as see the faces and see the engagement. Plus, what made it really also difficult was that I had people that were remote, so we always work in teams with a lot of the exercises. So I had people in the classroom who were in teams, but they had to stay 6 feet apart, and I had a team remotely. And at the end of the 2 days, I was exhausted. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know how teachers are doing this today. And then I taught, like I said, the semester course, and that was remote, but that was even challenging as well. So I think from the principal, I think one of the things I would say, depending on how recently the principal was in the classroom, teaching, I would encourage them to walk in those shoes, to walk in the shoes of the teacher, because it's one thing to sit around the table or have a one-on-one conversation, but to have true empathy and understanding for the situation, like you have to live it with them. From design, there's a technique called ethnographic interviewing. It comes from anthropology, where you would really immerse yourself into a culture to understand the language and interactions and, the language and just how that particular culture operates. I would encourage the principal to get as close to that as possible to, and it's more than just observing. It's not just in the room and observing, taking notes. I mean, it's really, really trying to be within the body of that, situation.
Mm.
And so that would be one of the first things I would recommend them to do is get as close to that. And of course, you have many different teachers and many different styles and many different situations, but to observe it and live it firsthand would be my first advice.
So we encourage principals to never lose their touch with the classroom. In actual fact, many principals still have a teaching load. It's very small. It's like 1 or 2 classes that you need to teach. It's because of this you still need to have your roots firmly set in the classroom. Otherwise, how can you really give guidance or leadership to your staff? Now, I really like that. Like, let's get the principals on ground level. Let them fully understand what the teachers are going through. And if the principal doesn't have that relationship with their staff, I see it happen often. The principal becomes this authoritarian leader, just on his pedestal, ivory tower, looking down on the staff. I mean, in that case, you're so far removed from reality that you can't really have empathy with the teachers. So I really like that.
Yeah, like I said, until I taught those 2 days in the classroom, of course I'm thinking about it. I am close to a couple little girls who are doing remote teaching, and I've seen kind of firsthand the challenge of the teacher trying to keep 6-year-olds engaged and so. But I had that perspective, but I had not been the person standing in that classroom. One trying, like I said, to project and engage and it changed the whole way that I facilitated, as well as how to try to read the classroom, how to keep momentum. And I could tell people were getting fatigued more easily than what I was used to in training this type of educational program that we offer. It was entirely different. And I left there when I flew back home. I'm like, this is entirely changed my whole perception of the challenges that the teachers were facing. Unlike anything, and unless I had stood in their shoes, I would not have appreciated it.
Absolutely. It comes back to that notion in education. We speak about situated embodied cognition. You can remove yourself outside of the classroom and think about what the challenges for teachers are. But until you are embodied, until you are in the situation, your body starts feeling what the challenges are. And once you felt the challenge in your bones, you can never unfeel it. And that's when you start thinking of solutions. Kim, I wanted to ask you about this. Now, teachers, we do a little bit of law in the time that we study, but I mean, it's education law in South Africa. It's based on the South African Schools Act, but there's no real way that teachers, number one, understand the language, because law speak is a whole language on its own, and I know very few teachers who really make it their mission in like knowing the documents. But that's got repercussions because the law needs to be translated in such a way that teachers understand it, and that we can operate within its framework. Do you find that also challenging with the clients that you work with? And do you have any like tips for teachers that are dealing with suddenly they're faced with repercussions from law and from policies? Like how do we handle that?
And it's interesting because, teachers aren't alone in trying to understand legal speak. Nobody really enjoys reading the terms of, when's the last time you read the terms of like your iPhone or any of that stuff? Everybody's just clicking, I accept the terms. And there's a movement within legal to try to really centered around contracts, and contracts are all over us. I mean, we all are really mired in them. We just, like I said, many times it's just checking a box and moving through it. But whether you're doing a non-disclosure, a non-compete, or real estate deal or whatever. So there's a movement, and it comes from the world of design, business design, and design thinking to make some of this stuff more visual,
Mm.
to make contracts. It's interesting. We work with some big clients, which I can share, like Microsoft and VMware and such, and those technical companies struggle with the same thing, and so they're exploring unique and different ways to make legal speak, make legal jargon more accessible and understood. And there's one company, I think it's Google. I'm trying to remember which company now. I don't have it exactly. I'd have to find it for you, but they've actually turned their contract into a comic strip. They've made it into a comic strip so that somebody can actually digest it and consume it. So that's not a direct answer to your questions, like how do teachers get more comfortable with that. I'd say what's making it easier, and it's intimidating at the same time, and I talk to my clients about this all the time, is like you see companies like LegalZoom, you're seeing that it's legal is becoming more accessible, and it's like DIY and self-guided. You can create your own will, you can do this with very little guidance. Now, some people are still really intimidated by even going on to something like LegalZoom and say they want to do their will. They're like, oh no, I think I still need a lawyer for that. Um, and so as we work with the law school students and these companies that have this, it's this continued like trying to break it down so that it is making it easier. And some of those large law firms are even partnering with like a LegalZoom so that maybe it's not completely self-guided, but you get a little bit of help from a legal expert to answer the questions. But you'll see a lot of those programs where there's more and more built-in informational guidance, that you can click on, and they're trying to make it very layman terms, so it's not as intimidating, so it's easier. And everybody in their life at some time or other usually will need legal of some sort. Buying a house, you could even say, if you look at the terms of buying a car, automobile, or something like that. So there is a movement to try to make that easier for everybody, including teachers or anybody that's involved in that.
So what this tells me, and I always want to bring it back to the classroom, is whenever a teacher looks at a legal document, imagine that's what the kids in your class feel like when you teach them. Because teachers we've got this mandate that we need to take the unknown and make it accessible to kids. And that's a massive challenge. If you do not understand the living world of the child, it's very difficult to relay information. Now, what you've just said, like converting something complex into comic strips, that's something teachers need to do. If there's a concept or very difficult theory or any piece of content that's difficult to explain, like change that into a comic strip, see what that does.
Right. Yeah. When we work with our law firms who serve these large, huge corporate law departments of like the Global 500, we usually ask them one thing. So we have these two groups, one's a consumer, one's a provider, right? And we even challenge the client in that situation and the law firm, how easy are you to do business with? And you have to look at it from both ways. You can't just point the finger and blame the law firm or blame the client. It's like, how easy are you to do business with? And I think from the teacher's perspective, almost taking the same notion that we said about the principal walking in the shoes of the teacher. It's like, how do you get the teacher into the shoes of the student? How do they, for some, it was many years ago that they were in sixth grade or whatever year they may be teaching. And how do we make it easy for that information exchange, the consumption of that information? And that's what I love about teachers and the trip through memory lane, thinking about all those teachers all the way, like I said, back to my first grade teacher and like fun things they did to engage. And, I think the rest of the world could learn a lot through putting Play-Doh on a table. And I use all kinds of non-technology artifacts and such to engage people when we were in person. Now it's a little harder. But I think getting the teachers to have that empathy, renew their empathy as what it is to be a learner in the classroom, and think about not necessarily like how easy you do business with, but how easy are you to engage with, and that consumption of information, the exchange of information would be valuable.
How can we reduce the friction between the content that needs to be learned and the learner that needs to learn it? If we can work on reducing as much friction as we can, the process becomes seamless and people learn easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Kim, I think that's a great space for us to end our conversation off. I know there's a lot more that can be said, but Kim, I know that you also do public speaking appearances and that you've got keynote talks that you deliver. First of all, the topic of your keynote talks, and how can people get hold of you if they want you to come and speak to their schools or to their companies?
So a lot of my work has been in the process improvement arena, which is really helping people to think about how to eliminate waste from their day, like how to get more hours back in their day. And that's by taking some tools and techniques in my discipline of Lean Six Sigma, process improvement, like getting them to think about, are they working on the right thing at the right time, using the right tools and such. So it's waste slayer, like learning to become a waste slayer. So my keynote is really about, it's not about not having enough hours in the day, it's are you using them in the right way? So I speak on that and help companies and leaders think about how they themselves, as well as their teams, are working efficiently, effectively. That's really my focus and what I've been speaking on lately.
Excellent. And if they want to get hold of you, book you to come and speak, where do they do that?
They can email me directly at kcraig@bulldogstudio.com, or go to the website, like I said, or hit me on Twitter or LinkedIn.
Excellent. I'm excited to get to know more about, especially this productivity stuff from you. I'm sure there's a whole other episode for us to speak about this, and I will definitely reach out soon to have a chat about I don't want to call it productivity hacks, but as you say, using the allocated hours in your day optimally. Kim, thank you very much for spending time with us. Very interested to see how your career as a public speaker develops, but the great work that you're doing in law, just keep it up.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. So thanks, Francois.
Stay super.
Well, that's it for today's show. I hope that you found value and that your classroom or your boardroom is now a better place to work at. Please go check out the website staysuper.co.za to find out how my keynotes, workshops, or mastermind can assist you in teaching like a superhero. Until I see you in person or chat with you online, stay super.